evening and welcome to the coffee table. Today we have a very, very interesting discussion and a very interesting guest. But before we get into the program, I have some really bad and sad news. One of our favorite artists, right, that a lot of us actually saw in our teens, and she was one of the best faces on TV. Only was she one of the best faces, she was one of our best actresses. Ruhi Bano recently passed away in Turkey. She had not been well for a while. And it is really sad, you know, the way the later part of her life actually panned out. So, Meher, you have seen Ruhi Bano on television, PTV, right? So, Kiran Kahani and, all those programs. I remember Ruhi from Kiran Kahani. I met her also. I met her in the late 90s, right? I was at that time running a TV channel, and I was introduced to her because she was in very difficult position at that time. So we tried to help her as that. But we know about Ruhi. So would you like to say something about her?
First, may she rest in peace. It's just, it's devastating news. But the thing that struck me the most about her death is the apathy that was shown to her for so many years, not just by her own community, but by the government. This was somebody.
She's a Pride of Performance winner.
Pride of Performance
winner. So what does it mean?
She was brilliant at the time when we were growing up, when we were in school, when we were in college, and we used to watch her plays. Even then, she was different. She was not just a brilliant actress. When you talk about a Shabana Azmi or a Samita Patel, she was that kind of an actress.
She was in that caliber.
She was in that category. Her talent was that huge. And it's just her personal life, and then her son died, and apparently...
Her son was murdered very young.
Yes, he was 20 years old, and I think that's the worst thing that can happen to a human being. And the fact that people didn't really care. She was, reportedly at the Fountain House in Lahore, and I don't think anybody really helped her the way they should have. You can't really go and ask people and ask government to help you. They should do these things on their own, because it's quite interesting how when you're a star and you have everybody wants you to be at their event. If it's a state affair, if it's any awards show, they all want you to be there. But in our country, unfortunately, despite the fact that everybody knew that she was a huge actress, they never really associated they never really gave her the respect that anybody at her stature would have been given in any other country where acting is considered a very big thing. And this it's a lesson for all of us. I'm not just blaming the government or
so we're going to do a whole program, right? Next week, I think we should plan that.
Absolutely.
So we can talk about this. Coming back to our subject for today, so the guest we have is a very good friend. I've known him for a couple of years now. I've followed his work for a longer period of time. And he comes all the way from the US of A every 6 months. And what brings him back to Pakistan is the young people of Pakistan. He comes to talk to them, and he comes to discuss with them, and he comes to, in a way, experience with them what we call design thinking. So Shahid Khan, right, you're from the Bay Area in San Francisco. So how did you get to San Francisco from Cadet College Kohart?
If I had scored few more marks in chemistry in FSC, I would still be in Pakistan.
You'd still be in Pakistan. So at times it's not good to score too much. It can take you abroad. How long have you been in the US now?
To be frank, actually I've stopped counting.
You stopped counting. You stopped counting at 20, 25, 30, 35?
I count backwards.
You count backwards. So you have twin sons, right?
I have twin sons and a third son who's older than the twins. So
you have a third son? Okay.
I don't know he exists either. So.
Do they like chemistry?
No.
They don't like chemistry.
But they ended up in the medical.
So Meher, you mentioned the word apathy, right? And the one word that I've heard from Shahid over and over and over and over again is empathy. Right?
The opposite of empathy.
The opposite of apathy. Yes. So what exactly is empathy? Because that's at the core of design thinking, isn't it?
Right.
So what is empathy? How do we best describe it?
So once I was in Japan, I stayed over the weekend, and somebody was taking me around, and we stopped for coffee in McDonald's. And so I got the coffee, and I'm looking for sugar. I can't find any sugar. So then the person who was at the counter, he kind of came over through sign language. He said, here is the sugar. The sugar was in a bottle in liquefied form.
Okay.
Because when you put liquid in coffee, it dissolves immediately. You don't have to stir it.
That's Japan for you.
That is empathy, because I have always wondered, whenever coffee is served in US, you have to open the packet, and while you're stirring, you're making the coffee cold. The milk that is put in US is cold, and it has never made sense to me, because the coffee is supposed to be hot.
Yeah.
So that's one.
So empathy is not making your coffee cold.
Right? It's not making coffee cold.
Making sure.
And if you need to add sugar, you add it in a way it doesn't get cold.
Right.
The second example is you're a foodie. When you go to the restaurant, even for on the table, there is salt and pepper.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to really get the stuff out?
It takes.
Right.
Checking
If you go to Turkey, their containers are porcelain.
Okay. Porcelain.
For salt and pepper. So the stuff never jams up.
Right.
That is empathy.
That's empathy.
Making it so easy and beautiful for the customer or whoever it is that it just works.
Yeah.
You don't have to struggle with it. So those are
empathy is always about the other person.
Always about the other person.
About the other person, right? So I have to look at the other person and say, what is it that he or she would really want, right?
Exactly.
That I can possibly have a solution to.
Right.
Your take on empathy?
This is a word that's very important to me. I believe this is the basis of all human interactions on a personal, collective, societal, governmental, any level. The first thing, as opposed to apathy, you have to see everything that's happening around you. What you mentioned, if you're talking about it in a general way, and people would say, oh, it doesn't really matter. चीनी कैसे डाली ये क्या बात है? But this simply shows that in that environment, in that context, in the context of where you were getting your coffee, and that's what matters. How you get your food, how that food is made, how that food reaches the customer, and how hot it is, and the wrapper, and the way it's wrapped, and the way it's served. Of course, it makes a world of difference.
Right.
And
so let me give a contrast just to make sure that.
Absolutely.
So the contrast is I wouldn't name the people in the story. So there was an auto company, and that noticed that the second populous country, the middle class, has grown to 300 million people.
Right.
And they can afford to buy a car for $8,000. So they took the car in their own land, which was worth $20,000, and they stripped few things out to make sure the cost is $8,000. One of the things they stripped out was the automatic window control from the passenger seat.
Okay.
So when they launched the car in the country, in 3 months, you want to guess how many cars they sold? Just a guess.
A dozen. Why would I buy a car?
A dozen, roughly.
So they didn't sell the car. The car never.
They were not able to sell the car. So then they woke up saying, oh, I think we need to find out a little bit more about the buyers.
Yeah.
So when they did the research, empathy-based research, they found out everybody who could buy a car for $8,000 also had a chauffeur. So who got the automatic window control? The owner or the chauffeur? The chauffeur.
People decided to roll down your window or not roll it up. Yeah.
Especially if it's in a hot city.
Yes.
Where in summer you need to.
Yeah.
So there are far more many mistakes in business that have been made because
you never asked that question.
So if you had to give an example of something that is more, what should I say, which more people can relate to. You know, for instance, you're talking about an $8,000 car. At the end of the day, even now, not many people can afford that $8,000 car. So give me an example of something that would be used, that is used by almost, say, everybody in this room. And that originated from somebody's empathy, somebody like you, who could empathize with what the people needed. He could see, he could sense, he or she could sense what they needed. So give an example.
So let's say somebody who is visually impaired, not all of it, but some of it.
Yeah.
And they're trying to walk from this room the first time towards the elevator. Can they actually do it today?
Not under the current circumstances. There are too many challenges on the way.
Exactly. So let's say they make it as far as the elevator. It's visually impaired.
You can't press the button. Right? Doesn't know which button to press.
The button has no dots on it, so they can do sign language read. Because somebody forgot completely about people who may be less able than we are.
I've seen that. I mean, I've seen that recently that the university I work in, right? So I got a message, I actually got a call from Tanzila that you've met also. Now she is in a wheelchair, right? It's a powered wheelchair, but she's still in a wheelchair. And she said, I'd like to come, but do you have access? I said, well, yes, because I remembered there's a ramp outside, so she can probably roll up. There is a lift, so she can probably come up in that. She said, but from what I know, right, in your university, you do not have bathrooms with access. And that is the first time I realized how important it is. And I realized also that there is only one building in the entire campus that actually has access for wheelchairs, right, to the bathrooms also. And that's the law school. But you'd imagine.
So let me give it connected to the example. So imagine anybody in this room gets an admission into one of the elite universities in Lahore. And on the first day, they invite the parents to come with them. So let's say two situations. One is they have a car, and for some reason, just before the gate, the car breaks down. So they have to get out and enter the gate. There is an open sewer right in front that is so nasty. And this university has been around for a long time. So what is the first impression you get? Now, situation two, let's say the head of state from another country wants to visit this elite institution. So, of course, there's a motorcade, and just before the gate, the motorcade breaks down. Their car breaks down, and they have to walk.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Their cars don't break down.
Their cars don't break down.
But I know
I will not go back.
So just the fact that nobody has taken the assumption that was made, everybody is going to come into a car, is the lack of empathy.
What you just said about wheelchair, I was just thinking the fact that you see ramps everywhere in the world now, at least in the developed world or even in the Middle East, you'll see ramps for wheelchairs, wheelchair-bound people. I was just thinking that in Pakistan, the idea is that most of the people who are on a wheelchair will not be moving around that much.
But that's wrong.
I know. What I'm saying is these attitudes are changing. So you're on a wheelchair. If you can't walk, you will be somebody who's working from home and you're not getting out much. And even when you get out much, the idea here is not to be self-sufficient. There will always be somebody to help you, somebody who will pick up your wheelchair and put you in a car and take you out. And
we're going to come back to
yes,
this.
Yes, we don't, what you just said, that the assessment is not there.
Assumptions. So we're going to take a short break, right, and come back, get a fresh cup of coffee. See you after the break. Welcome back. Before we went away to the break, we were talking about design thinking. I'd introduced Shahid, who is the design thinker that I know of. And I've met a few, but nobody really understands it as well as you do. The process, right, of design thinking. So we're starting with empathy, which is the other person. We have to have that deep desire to learn what the other person wants. So we have to ask those right questions instead of assuming what they want, right? So it starts from there. And where do we go from there?
So let's assume that we are able to convince this university to create spaces for differently enabled people. And they said, okay, the project is go ahead. The first thing to do is to get few less able people into a
come in.
room, one-on-one first. You really start by asking, what is the best thing in your life right now?
Right.
So they will give you a positive frame of mind. And then from there you say, you know, in your daily life, what challenges you most? And really listen, because this is a listening exercise.
Yeah, it's a listening exercise.
At the same time, you observe that, for example, if it's a person who is sitting in a wheelchair, you also, typically you do this research in pairs of two.
Right.
So my colleague will be taking pictures of the wheelchair.
Okay.
So you look at that instance, and then you need to talk to about 10 to 15 such users. The other thing, because they may be differently enabled, you need to have extreme users.
Right.
Somebody who's very comfortable getting around without the ramps, and somebody who's completely uncomfortable.
Right.
And then they're in the middle.
Yeah.
So from that one-on-one interviews, you develop a hypothesis
A hypothesis.
that this is the common challenge that they face in life.
Yeah.
Based on that common challenge, you also develop a persona, saying, you know, this kind of person needs access to a ramp.
So the power of one. So one person, right? You bring it down, distill it all down to that one person who faces those challenges, right? For whom it is critical to have access to buildings, to places they want to go to be able to be mobile, to be able to get out, to have the freedom of movement, rather than being dependent on somebody. So that's one. Meher, we were talking offline, right? And you mentioned to me which something which was very interesting. The movie that is banned here, right? Padman, right? So it's a true story, isn't it?
Yes, and
And when I thought of it,
I should have Googled his name again, because it's very, very complicated. It's a very difficult name, and even Twinkle Khanna can't say the name.
Okay.
So Twinkle Khanna, Akshay Kumar, I'm not going to introduce, I shouldn't even say that she's Akshay Kumar's daughter,
Right.
Wife. She is a columnist, and she was, I think it was her second book. For that book, she interviewed this person who was making sanitary napkins, cheap sanitary napkins in India for women who could not afford to buy expensive
branded ones.
branded ones. And so she chased him for a number of months, and finally she managed to get him to sit for an interview. And then she wrote a story in her book, and the story turned into a movie. There's a bit of fiction in the movie, but the story is that in India there are a number of women, millions of women, who do not have access to a number of things, personal hygiene stuff, and the fact that we don't even say certain words on our television and in our media.
No, we should. I mean,
And because what happens in that movie is he sees his own wife in a lot of pain, and he sees that his wife is using things that she should not be using, and they were unhygienic, and he had seen the same thing with his mother and with his sisters, and he was just very unhappy about what his wife was going through. So this is where it started. And then the person, it's such an inspirational story of somebody who noticed one woman's agony, and one woman's, agony is too big a word, but when you're saying that a person does not have access to a very basic thing, that is an agony.
It is agonizing. It is painful.
In a manner. It also deals with other issues related to women.
The taboo subjects, not being able to talk about it.
Because you see the lack of toilets in India, even in Pakistan, there are many women who need to. That's another movie, by the way. That's Akshay Kumar's other movie. So the wife wrote a beautiful, Twinkle Khanna wrote a beautiful story, and then the husband became a part of her effort to make a difference, because this is writing and this is filmmaking beyond entertainment and beyond giving your opinion. They are actually trying to make a change, and that simply happened because a man noticed. The man was empathetic. He was empathetic to what his wife was going through and what his wife didn't have. All of you must see that movie. What he goes through. And finally, he is now that I'm so sorry for not being able to. I will Google his name in the next break. That now he gives lectures at Ivy League universities. He still can't speak English very well, but he's an he's an uneducated person
Right.
who used to ride a bicycle, and what he has achieved, it started with what was happening in his own house.
Right, right. So if you remember,
Yeah.
you were kind enough to give me and my family a tour in Old City.
Oh, Adil Lahori, right?
Adil Lahori.
Adil Lahori.
So one of the things that when he took us to the side streets
Yeah.
was the narrowness of the
Yes,
street.
the Surjant Singh Gully.
Yes,
Right, the ultimate Patli Gully.
exactly. So when he explained that the fact why these streets are narrow,
Yeah.
this was for a defensive purpose.
Absolutely.
So how many people had died before
Yeah.
they figured out
Yeah.
that they need to make houses which are going to make the streets narrow,
So narrow.
so the sword of
you
the
can't wield a
attacker
sword, huh?
is not going to work.
Yeah.
Neither the stabbing with the dagger is
Yeah.
going to work. That is empathy.
That is empathy. Of a totally different kind. so tell me something. Is it always very, very personal? Right? Do I look at others because of my own personal experience? Something I've experienced myself, something I've seen myself. And that's when I start to notice that this is a problem that other people have.
So it may start with the personal observation, but in order to deliver a successful solution, which is not only solving the problem, but it is also elegant and beautiful.
Right.
We have to
Elegance and beauty is a part of that.
Yes,
right?
very
It
big
has
part.
to be part of that.
So we have to suspend our observation at that point, instead get into the head and the heart
Right.
of the person that we're trying to
So the
solve
heart
for.
is extremely important. So it's not just all about the head.
Yeah.
It's not just all about logic.
Because empathy comes from the heart.
Empathy comes from the heart.
Arunchal Alam Muruganantham. I'm so sorry, but I had to say his name. We can't give a story without.
Arunchalam,
You have to read it. Maybe you'll do a better.
Arunachalam, Murubanantham. Okay. Ganantham, okay. Just put it on the screen. Put it on the screen. Put it on the screen.
Only Twinkle
Oh, so
Khanna.
that's got to be South Indian, right?
Yes,
He's got to
only
be from
Twinkle
South
Khanna.
India.
I think he's from Tamil Nadu.
Or Tamil Nadu, okay.
It's you see, if you have a great
Okay,
idea,
tell me an
even if
experience,
it's
tell me
even
an
if it's
experience
something,
personally, locally, where you felt, right, that here is a problem that somebody has that I would like to address and I would like to find a solution to it.
I think that would be related to textbooks in Pakistan.
Okay.
For state-run schools. There are these two children in our house, and unfortunately, despite the love that we give them, we are unable to send them to a proper school, an English medium school, because the way things work here.
Does the school have to be English medium?
They don't even admit children if they don't come from a certain background. So now I am going to make sure that they do get into a good school, meaning, but unfortunately, state-run schools at the moment do not really provide the education
I would
that.
extend that discussion to every school.
Yeah.
The reason is
I agree.
the textbooks are written with zero empathy.
Zero empathy.
So that
Because-
word again, empathy, right? Let's kind of deconstruct this word completely and say, what does it mean?
So let me give an example.
It's not sympathy.
So let me give an example.
Okay, so when you're talking about empathy in terms of textbooks, please explain.
Did anybody ever sit down with the target children and learn what their needs, desires, dreams, and wants are?
Why would I want to ask a child? What does a
then
child know?
उनको तो पता ही नहीं होगा. That's
So-
what will be said.
A child between the age of 2 to 7 is so creative. It is the most creative period of life. The child goes first day in the class, and the teacher says, today we are going to learn A, B, C, D. And Faisal, you're a child, you raise your hand saying, I want to talk about the story of Parrot.
Yeah.
The teacher shuts you up.
Yeah. And
Yes.
say, we are going to study A, B,
And
C, D.
parents do the same thing.
Because they're coming from the same system. So to digress a little bit, the reason I made the comment, the entire Western education system, which we are also practicing, was designed in 1855 in Germany to produce factory workers.
Yeah, absolutely. Industrial revolution, you wanted people who could do repetitive jobs
So
without
we
thinking.
are producing repetitive work factory workers. The knowledge work has not been taken into account. And the fact, the history is that in 8th, 9th century, there is a building still in Cordoba.
Yeah.
And if you still go to that grand mosque, it has a lot of pillars. And the reason for pillars is not because there was a big roof. Against each pillar, the sheikh would come in the morning on a little stool, so he is sitting higher than the students.
To watch the...
Teaching.
Teaching.
That
So the
was-
sheikh would decide, today we are going to talk about math. And sheikh would determine maybe after 2 weeks, okay, now we need to move to chemistry. So there was no timed learning concept. Right now, one of the things in that 1855 system, every period is like 50 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Everybody learns in a different time frame.
I call it the sage on
Actually,
stage.
my son went to an international school in Lahore, and now he's at NYU. And fortunately, the school system was really what he needed. He was somebody who's very smart, but he's not somebody who can sit down and write pages and pages on things like how I was taught when I was a child, since I went to a British system school. So in his school, they did encourage children to think beyond the lines, and what I said even in the last show, to question the questions.
Yeah.
To think the word that everybody uses, out of box or
Out of the box.
Out of the box.
Why is
out
there
of
a
the
box in the first place? Who put everything in the box?
Absolutely, but in their school, what they did was that they increased the duration of the class. Instead of 45 minutes, it became 1.5 hours. Of course, most of the children were half asleep by the time one class ended. But they said, this is the time that is needed to at least get something across. And at least, the teacher said they needed to make sure that the children understood what they were being taught. So they just had 4 classes every day. School started at 7:45, ended at 2:55. There were 2 breaks. And
So empathy.
So I'm not trying to be contrarian.
No, you have to be
that's not
no,
right.
it actually worked.
Yeah, yeah.
So any time-based learning
Yeah,
is a
is
flawed
out.
learning.
Seriously.
So
Any time-based learning is flawed
I
learning. We're going to
totally
come back
agree
to
with
this.
you.
So in fact,
I'm trying to figure out who am I going to support. If it was going to be
We,
Meher,
both
it's
of
going
us-
to be
both
Shahid.
of us-
Shahid is going to go away to San Francisco. I have to be with
Both
Meher.
of us agree with one another. And I think all of us
And we're
are on
going
the
to
same page.
take a break right now. Welcome back. So it was heating up here at the coffee table. We had Meher saying, a 90-minute class from 45 to 90. Shahid maintains that any time-based learning is not going to really work, right? So what do we do, right? How do we create an immersive environment where children can learn? Because we're talking about children, right? Once you go past age 7, 8, right, it's all done. You're not going to learn.
it still
much.
applies.
It still applies. Okay.
So there's actually an experimental school called Khan Lab School in Palo Alto, the same person who has created the
Khan
free
Academy?
Khan
Khan
Academy.
Academy. There is no concept of time, there are no classes.
Wow.
Children are
Oh,
grouped,
such a wonderful day. I wish I could be a child again.
teachers are
Don't
grouped
put
by
ideas
their
in people's
levels of
heads.
maturity. And so they work on project basis.
Okay.
So once I was taking a tour, and this group, the youngest was 9 and the oldest was about 13. And they were debating, one side debated the reason for justifying the Vietnam War.
Right.
And the other side then spoke about why that war was horrible.
And this is children.
Age group,
Yeah.
9 to 13.
Amazing.
They had done all their research on their own. There are educators who are only there if the children comes to them for help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the new way of learning is project-based learning. You give a problem, you give some guidelines, let them free. Because the information of the entire planet is now available to us, first time in the history of mankind.
Absolutely. We have so much access, right? So we can learn at any stage, at any age, any subject.
What
I
you're
want to
saying
learn
is,
how to cook, I can learn.
Everybody is going to say that it's just a one-off thing and it doesn't really work for everybody, and people need discipline and they need to be regimented in a certain way. And And I do agree, yes, honestly, somebody like me, if I were given a chance to just be on my own, I would not do many useful things.
If you were in Germany in the 1930s, you would have been general manager of IG Farben.
Well, I would
Steelworks.
What I'm saying is I need some kind of discipline because I'm a procrastinator. I need a deadline. I am a perfectionist when I'm doing what I'm doing, but I need to be pushed. I will write when I know that now I have to write.
So the first thing these children are taught is time management.
Okay.
First thing. So they have deadlines.
Asset.
They have training, how to do this. They have deadlines, and they decide among themselves what pace they need to go.
To reach that goal.
To reach that goal. So the tragedy is because of this antiquated education system, people come into the workspace, whether it's entrepreneurship or regular jobs. What do we need now? We don't need repetitive work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If it's repetitive work,
You'll
it is going to go away through artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
What is needed right now is human creativity, which no machine can clone at this point.
Yeah.
So all this in the life, that creativity was never encouraged or mentored or coached.
Yeah.
So people who are in their careers, maybe 30s and 40s, they're saying some event happens and they have to switch. They are stumped. It's the most traumatic things because we have...
They lose their job or the industry tanks
Right.
or things change.
So in the group today, I was talking about if you're hiring people for your team, especially you have very good way to measure the technical ability. Soft skills, how do you measure? And what traits do you look for?
Yeah.
So this is, I'm sharing this based on scientific learning. When I hire for 4 things on the soft side. Number 1, constant learner. And you can test for it.
Yeah.
Simply ask the question, what was the last book you read in 6 months? And what is one thing you're using? What is one great movie you saw and what was memorable? So you can test. The second one is humbleness. Because unless I'm humble, I will not listen to
That is connected to the first one. People who are humble will
knowing
will
your
be
own
willing to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah. Knowing your own inadequacy and saying it's never done.
Right.
It's always work in progress.
Right. So constant learning, humbleness. The third one is playfulness, because times do get tough.
Playfulness.
That reminds me of you.
I am a design thinker. I'm
So
very playful.
You know, when Faisal and I were sitting down and the make person came, I just joked, do you also have lipstick? I like to put the lipstick on. Because that is, it turns out, play is central to creativity.
Yes.
You go on
The
YouTube.
sandbox, right?
The sandbox.
The sandbox.
You go on YouTube and you search for different animals will playing each other.
Yeah.
You will find a polar bear is playing with a dog that is changed. They are playing.
Yeah.
A crow is riding on the back of a cat.
Yes, I follow Twitter. I follow Dodo on Twitter. There's this Twitter account.
Exactly.
And it has the
You
most
follow Dodo?
amazing. It has the most amazing animal videos you would see anywhere in the world. This, they're all like, seriously, again, stories of empathy, people noticing animals in pain, or there are some playful videos. Right. There's a dog who lives among ducks, and you see this dog with the ducks riding on his back. They're like, they make me so happy, because I love animals, and it's
So playfulness is the third one. What's
Playful.
the fourth?
The fourth and the final one is the ability, is the person is built for taking action.
Okay.
For example, if a task is given, the person is not going to do a 6-month thesis on what the problem is.
Right.
Is to take action right away.
So, Mr.
For example,
Asad, please get a move on. Right. Let's see those policies coming out. Let's see things happening.
Did you just bring
Asad into it?
Oh God! Oh my God! Is this politicized? A very
Have I? I'm talking about design thinking. I'm saying
no. I just listened
on.
to his budget speech.
Budget speech.
And
did you like it?
I was blown away because a lot of empathy was shown. For example, the tax on a mobile phone that is at the lower end.
Sorry to interrupt. You are somebody who doesn't live in Pakistan. You live in San Francisco. I want to make this very clear that we did not get a PTS photo on the show. So
I'm
now
not sure.
continue.
I didn't say I'm a supporter. I'm
No,
just
Yes, that is
commenting.
the most important thing. That this is not a PTI supporter commenting on Asad Umar's speech. You're talking as somebody who's
I
in
think
the
the
business.
factor was empathy, like you
Huh.
said. You know, the empathy.
Please explain. I
He
would
showed
love to hear more
empathy
about this.
by eliminating the taxes on, for example, raw material. Because if we are taxing the raw material, we're just destroying
We're
our own
increasing the
industrial
price.
base.
Yeah, absolutely.
So everything that he announced, if you watch carefully, it was coming from an empathetic position.
Yeah.
And that
Understanding.
is what inspired me.
Feeling
That,
the
wow.
pain. Well, we have a prime minister who's very empathetic, right?
He is.
He comes out and says things, and everybody says, what is he talking about? He's talking about chicken. He's talking about eggs.
And
he's talking about calves.
At nighttime, touring the homeless
Yes.
facility,
Yeah.
unannounced.
I wrote about that.
Yeah.
To me, it's a huge
One-
thing.
I have one question for both of you. Right? What is the best sunset you've ever seen?
Actually, very recent. On December 31st, I had taken a trip to Azerbaijan. And on the plane, when I came back, I said, I don't want to celebrate the end of the year. I want to celebrate the beginning of the year. So I got up 5 in the morning. I have some hills nearby home. I walked up and I watched the sunrise.
The sunrise. What about you, Meher?
Sunset.
Or sunrise, either of the two.
I awake most of the mornings when the sun rises. But I've never been. I think sunset would be in Langkawi, Malaysia,
Malaysia.
because it was a resort and there was the sea and it was a very traditional
So
run
the
of the
reason I
mill.
asked that question is because we were talking about beauty, right? We were talking about the real truth lies in actually lies in beauty.
Yes.
And beauty lies in truth also, right? So John Keats, right? Think of beauty as joy forever, and truth is beauty, and beauty is truth.
Right.
So my favorite sunset is actually in Myanmar. Unbelievable.
The story.
The unbelievable, a kaleidoscope of colors on the sky. Never seen anything quite like it. So we're going to talk about sunrises, sunsets, coffee, jalebi, barfi, bun kebab, burgers, and this is the coffee table.
Sushi?
And sushi also. So we will catch you again tomorrow. Thank you for staying with us.